Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Justice Committee. So our first meeting of 2020. Now, we have apologies from Margaret Mitchell, who's another parliamentary commitment, and Jenny Gilruth, who similarly has a parliamentary commitment, but Jenny hopes to join us. So, agenda item 1 is our decision on taking business in private. And it's items 3 and 4, our consideration of evidence we'll hear today, and our discussion on the work programme. Are members agreed to that? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Our next item of business is our third and final evidence session on our inquiry into how the police service in Scotland makes use of facial recognition technology. And I refer members to paper 1, which is a note by the clerk, and paper 2, which is a private paper. And I welcome the witnesses to today's meeting: Duncan Sloan, Temporary Assistant Chief Constable, Police Scotland; Lynn Brown, Interim Chief Executive, Scottish Police Authority; and Tom Nelson, Director of Forensic Services, Scottish Police Authority. And I thank the witnesses for their written submissions, which, as ever, are very helpful to members. And we'll now move straight to questions. And question 1 from Liam, please.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon. Just for the record, it would be helpful if you set out the process by which custody and criminal history photographs are uploaded onto the Police National Database, and also perhaps how and when those photographs are subsequently deleted.
Certainly, thank you. I'll take that one, Convener. So the process that we have at this moment in time, so in Scotland, policing have their own criminal history system, if you like, for recording criminal histories, obviously, of any person convicted in court. At this present in time, in relation to your question in images, so when a person is brought into custody, is arrested and charged within Police Scotland, their image photograph is uploaded onto a national custody system. Thereafter, that is transferred to our criminal history system, and ultimately that is uploaded onto our Police National Database, which is a UK-wide database. That's an automatic upload as such. That would then, if you like, if the person was unconvicted at that time and that was a pending case for a crime or an offence, then that would be uploaded as a pending, if you like, and would be there for use. Once the individual has been through the criminal justice process and has appeared at court, then determining the outcome of that, whether they were found guilty or otherwise, if found not guilty, if you like, then there would be notification passed through from, well, it could come from actually a number of partners, if you like, but Crown Office or Procurator Fiscal Service, in general terms, in the first instance, that is passed to the police at the Records Bureau, and thereafter the image is deleted from the criminal history system, and thus the technical fix is deleted from the Police National Database.
This is automatic at the point of deletion?
It is, yes.
Right. Okay.
So there can be a manual aspect to that at the point of the Records Office where the notification is made, given because there could be complexities around numerous charges or offences as such. But at the point where it is updated to the Scottish criminal history system, it's deleted from the Police National Database. And
what's the sort of time frame for that? Is it matters of days, or how quickly does the process tend to work?
So I have, it's my understanding, and have asked some of the questions surrounding that, but it is as near to real time as possible when those results comes in. But there can be a number of complexities depending on number of charges, etc. But it is as near as real time as we have at this moment in time.
Right. And in terms of that database, are there other types of images that are uploaded, whether CCTV images that have been captured by body-worn cameras? I mean, what is the extent of the source of the images that appear on that database?
So on the criminal history system, none of them will be stored on that. That isn't absolutely in relation to the criminal history as such. And PND, which is the UK national policing, if you like, system, that can indeed, because it was set up initially in response to SOAM back in the day, and it was about information and intelligence sharing across the UK. So yes, it can contain intelligence images, CCTV images from a number of different sources, but not in relation to that specific question around criminal history.
Right. And in terms of the access to that database, how does that operate across forces across the UK?
There's national training that's rolled out, and people are trained in the specific use and access to both CHS, to Police National Database, and obviously the Police National Computer, the PNC, to specific training.
And is it envisaged, is it happening at the moment, that there's a cross-reference between that database and any use of live facial recognition technology?
So not in Scotland. And it's important to state at the moment in Police Scotland nationally, we are not using, nor trialling or testing any live facial recognition technology whatsoever.
And is your understanding in those areas where it has been used, that in a sense that database has been cross-referenced with the use of that?
Absolutely. It's my understanding, obviously, in some of the trials in England and Wales for the Metropolitan and South Wales.
Right, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Fulton, I believe you have...
Thanks, Convener, and good afternoon, panel. I was going to say good morning there. It's just a follow-up to Liam MacArthur's question. You'd said there about that the data would be deleted if a person is found not guilty. What happens in the case where a person is found guilty and perhaps a disposal is given, so the matter's effectively dealt with, maybe a community payback order or whatever other sentence is put in place? What happens with the data in those situations?
So there are weeding and retention policies obviously in place in relation to our criminal history system that are published and publicly available, obviously, where an individual is convicted of a certain crime type. And in broad terms, the weeding and retention policy follows, if you like, categories of crime. So to generalise lower forms, lower types of offences, there is a rule applied to them, more serious, and a kind of group 2, and then in a third part, which would be murder, which would be held indefinitely for a guilty plea. But there are time-set weeding retention policies for both criminal history, and by virtue of the fact it's an automatic, it rolls over onto Police National Database.
Thanks very much for that information. And just another brief point as well. I was looking for clarity on if a person is found guilty found not guilty, but maybe has outstanding matters to be dealt with by the court. What's the situation then regarding data if the issue which the data was kept for has been dealt with, but maybe the person has other outstanding matters? Is that a unique, I think you did touch on it, is that a unique set of circumstances, or is there strict rules?
Under legislation, it's only for DNA that we can, in certain circumstances, hold on to that sample, if you like, when we talk about in broad terms biometric data. The regulation is specific in the Criminal Procedure Scotland Act 1995 for that purpose in DNA. In relation to images, as I'm sure that the committee are aware, that legislative framework around that is not as clear.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Liam.
Thanks. Actually, Mr. Sloan, you began touching on the question I was going to ask, which was around the distinctions between the way in which both DNA and fingerprints are stored and then subsequently deleted, compared to what happens with images. I mean, is it broadly the same? You seem to suggest that for DNA there are different rules around what happens at the point of deletion.
So the images and DNA samples and fingerprints, which are categorised and specific in the legislation, are dealt with all in the same vein, if you like, by Police Scotland. So whilst there's no statutory legislation and guidance framework around those images, we use those images in the same way as DNA and fingerprints, and similarly, voluntarily, if you like, Police Scotland delete those images at the same point as DNA and fingerprints.
Right, so but that's custom and practice as opposed to a requirement in relation to the
absolutely.
Images. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Thank you. I wonder, do you think it would be helpful if the Criminal Justice Act were updated to include photographs and images?
Thanks, Convener. Absolutely is my response. Clearly, my colleagues have been more involved in some of the past history around the independent advisory group in biometrics, and obviously the bill that's in train at this moment in time. So clearly, any guidance and framework that would allow us to operate within would be valued and very much welcomed.
Thank you. I'm conscious, Mr Sloan, you've had all the questions there, and this could be something you will ask, or indeed the other panel members, but I want to maybe move into that now. And you talk about the framework. We've heard that Police Scotland's risks legal challenges if they use images held in the UK National Database of people who have not been convicted of any crime. Now, we're also aware that there was a High Court ruling in 2012, which is believed that it's not been adhered to. Can you comment on that, please? And I mean, is this an issue that concerns the authority, the potential for legal challenge on this?
So, by virtue of the fact, and as I gave in evidence earlier there, our system is such that we remove images from the database, criminal history and ultimately PND, then for policing in Scotland, it's not a concern in that regard. But clearly, as the committee will be aware, and by virtue of it being a national system, Police Scotland could have access to images which were uploaded, if you like, from forces within England and Wales. So, yes, Police Scotland could come across an image of a person who was not convicted, innocent, if you like, in part of our investigation and inquiries by utilising the PND. So that does create, if you like, a concern nationally probably. And given the 2012 ruling that it was illegal to hold those images, there's clearly an issue that I know the Home Office and the forces in England and Wales are working through to try and find a solution to weed those images. Okay, there was an inspectorate's report about images that were held by the legacy forces. And would it be right to say, Mr Sloan, then, that the situation isn't being compounded now, that images that would no longer be held? Let me rephrase this, I beg your pardon. You have the situation sorted, but it isn't sorted in respect of the legacy forces. Is that correct? That's correct, Convener. So there are some, and I'm not particularly technical, but there are some technical issues around legacy force, if you like, uploading. So systems previously within Scotland, obviously the legacy forces had different systems to record custody images, so when someone was brought into custody. There is clearly a technical, and we have a technical solution in place now that when, for instance, a person is brought into custody and is arrested and charged, our national custody system will take that image, it will be transferred to criminal history system, but it will then fall off, it will weed off our custody system, so it's no longer sitting in custody. However, from a legacy aspect, we still have systems in place that we're trying to work through some IT solutions in order for us to delete any images that we currently still hold. I can tell the committee convener that last year we've deleted over 400,000 images, and that includes held on hard drive and hard copy. So it is a process that is recognised, and if I can give the assurance from a Police Scotland perspective that we are working towards the situation where there will be no images held elsewhere other than the criminal history system. I imagine that the committee will feel reassured that the issue isn't being compounded, and also be reassured that there has been deletion of images that shouldn't have been kept. But is it fair to say that so long as there's an outstanding number of images being retained that shouldn't be retained, that they could feature on the UK National Database? No, Convener. They could not feature in the National Database because the only way they are uploaded to the Police National Database is through the criminal history system. So, and forgive me, I'm not at all technical, and I appreciate that we have a number of systems at play here, but the images that Police Scotland has that they would wish to delete, as I understand, they don't feature on the UK database. That is my understanding. My understanding that the images that are contained on the Police National Database are only held at point of charge, pending case, and thereafter deleted when there is a non-conviction and innocent. That part is taken care of. The aspect that we are having to work through is that we still hold from legacy areas images that were taken at that time, not connected to the criminal history. They just sit in a separate system. So we're working through those systems with technical people, IT if you like, to fix that. And that's a process that's just taken its course, if you like. So was it a change of processing that meant that when Police Scotland came into being,
that images were then uploaded to UK database that weren't previously?
No, it's always been the case that our Scottish criminal history system has always been the point of where an image is uploaded to the Police National Database. That is the point. There is no custody. Probably separate, if I can maybe try and clarify, so in England and Wales they don't have one system. So actual custody images that were taken at a police office were just then uploaded to PND. We have a central aspect of that, which is the Criminal History Service, which the custody images goes to that in the first instance and then is uploaded to PND.
Forgive me, I'm going to need to flog this because so the images that weren't in the criminal history system that are retained that you want to get rid of, what was the purpose of these and how did they come to be there in the first place?
So as part of the Her Majesty's Inspectorate for Scotland's inspection, and I think it was 2015 or 16, they looked at obviously the images that were stored by Police Scotland. Those images that are stored, and there are some still in existence in some legacy systems, were stored at that time there was no policy in weeding retention in legacy areas for that, but they were held. Basically, if someone was brought into custody and was given a false identity, they could be examined against the images that were held in custody. There was that purpose, and then for any complaints or investigations around their episode of being in custody, but completely separate to criminal history system and the Police National Database.
Was anyone other than anyone who was taken into custody do their photographs feature?
Not that I'm aware of. I certainly I don't have that information to hand, Convener. I certainly could go away and look at that one, but I am certain it is just people who have been brought into custody and arrested.
Okay, perhaps if you could come back to the committee with that. You'll understand when there's figures like 400,000, that's a significant percentage of the Scottish population, and it wouldn't necessarily, I imagine, be reflected in the processing through the criminal justice system. I appreciate it's over a long period of time. Can I ask the panel, please, about the... and this has been raised by Mr Sloan about the position of the UK forces, the legal framework in which the UK forces relied, those who have trialled live facial recognition. What's your understanding of that?
Convener, so there's obviously trials in the Metropolitan Police that I'm aware of and South Wales. There's obviously been much examination of that, both at judicial review level, NPCC oversight, and obviously Home Office funding, particular South Wales, to take part in those trials.
Sorry, Mr Sloan, I perhaps should just interrupt you in the question of the South Wales. You'll be aware that there's the potential for legal action, so we shouldn't comment in detail on that. Thank you. I suspect you weren't going to anyway, but just to...
Absolutely, Convener. So I think clearly it's our position in Police Scotland. It's best to emphasise we don't intend at this point in time to trial or test any live facial recognition technology. And indeed, whilst there is, and I can't speak for England and Wales, whilst there is testing and trialling ongoing, we would welcome, similarly as has been discussed before, a legal framework, and certainly for, to maintain that legitimacy, if you like, for Police Scotland, the consent of the people, we would welcome that more wider public debate with interested parties to understand what is the technology, how it would be used, etc., before embarking on a course of using such technology. So therefore, obviously, an introduction of a Scottish Biometrics Commissioner would be welcomed.
Thank you, yes, and there's an overlap with quite a bit of the work that's been done. Perhaps a final question for you just now, Mr Sloan. You obviously have some awareness of the trials that have taken place, and I imagine it's a watching brief that you've kept in it. Can you comment on the principles of necessity and proportionality, and a view whether you feel these have been met by the forces that have deployed them, and indeed the balance that we would all understand between community safety, public safety and individuals' liberties are being properly tested?
Yeah, again, Convener, I wouldn't like to comment obviously on specifically the Information Commissioners has opined on the use and the trials down south. There has been a judicial review, but I think it's fair to say you're right. we are keeping a close eye on how that technology is being utilised in the trials. But I think the most important aspect for Police Scotland in that is we need to strike the balance about the use of new technology, whether it be facial recognition technology or otherwise, but equally with, you know, to gain the trust and maintain the trust and legitimacy of the public. We would absolutely have to address the necessity, you know, and within the terms of the Data Protection Act, you know, that strict necessity of how we would apply such technology, and then indeed the proportionality aspect of it. So the wide use, if you like, of facial recognition technology, you know, I think there's a long way to go before, if ever, we would get to that stage. And for me, it would be based, just like we do with other techniques and tactics in Police Scotland, strictly intelligence-led and targeted if we were to embark. We're not, but if we were, it would be along those lines around necessity and proportionality.
Okay, thank you. Ms Brown, I understand where Police Scotland are with this, and they say there's no plans yet. The SPA and Police Scotland have it in their 10-year strategy that they would envisage this technology being used in the future. How crucial do you believe it would be to ensure there's a clear legal basis for the use of that technology?
Thank you, Convener. I think it's essential there's a clear legal basis. We welcome the decision to have a biometrics commissioner, and the fact that that commissioner will have more far-reaching powers than are available in England and Wales. We would welcome a code of practice, and our role in the SPA would be to make sure that Police Scotland were abiding by that code of practice. It is an area of intense public interest, and I think we have an opportunity to give the public confidence that we're approaching it in the appropriate manner.
I understand the authorities to consider Police Scotland's latest report on the digital triage devices, and I wonder if you feel that the potential use of facial technology, recognition technology, live facial recognition technology in the future, if there's lessons that can be learned from the approach that was taken in respect of that. And I know now that Police Scotland have had robust engagement and assessments made.
Yes, thank you, Convener. There's absolutely lessons to be learned from the cyber chaos, the digital triage, as it's been referred to tomorrow. I can't preempt what the authority are going to do, but this committee was very helpful actually in setting out the areas that needed to be considered, such as the impact on the community, the issues of privacy, the issues of information exchange, and they are covered, as I understand it, in the report. Impact assessments around human rights and data. That is what should be common practice in something like this, and we welcome the interest of the committee in that, and we think that is one of the areas that the Biometrics Commission would be particularly helpful.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Fulton.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about the 10-year policing strategy, the 2026. Given that the strategy endorses the use of new technologies, how will the SPA, so a question for yourself on, carry out its oversight and governance to ensure that necessary assessments such as human rights and data protection have been undertaken prior to those technologies being used?
Thank you. We, at present, and in fact the board today are having a development day looking at this on our oversight of change. That has been made more acute because of issues like cyber kiosk, the interests of the committee in facial recognition. So we are putting together, from our perspective, a more structured approach to how we would look forward in terms of what is going to be for decision going forward within that strategy. And we will work with outside agencies, and we'll work with, for example, Her Majesty's Inspector Constabulary in Scotland to make sure that we're addressing all the issues that should be addressed as we have oversight of those issues.
And will that include the consideration of ethical concerns? And if so, how would you propose that will take place?
Yes, it will. I know that the Audit Committee are particularly interested in that. I believe Police Scotland are setting up a data ethical committee as well. My colleague, Mr Nelson, has been involved with the digital working group that's looking at these issues. So it's absolutely essential that we do. I know that the board member, Mr Halpern, who chairs the Forensics Committee, is particularly interested in this, and in fact our Vice Chair is on the Human Rights Commission in Scotland, so we are very much conscious that is one area that we should be definitely making sure that the public interest is served.
Okay, thanks. So just one final question on this topic from myself. I know that the co-author, you're the SPA is the co-author of the 10-year strategy, and you've also got obviously the responsibility for independent oversight. Do you feel that that represents any conflict of interest?
We have a number of responsibilities in terms of our role. We have to support, we have to challenge, we have to scrutinise the Police Scotland, and we will try to do that in the most balanced way we can. The responsibility is that the SPA produce a strategy, but we have to work with the police. They know their service, they know what the issues are going forward. So there's been close collaboration and putting together something that is meaningful, but in the end it is the SPA strategy, and it will be considered tomorrow by the board.
Okay. And you don't think there's any conflict of interest?
In terms of the relationship between SPA and the police?
Yeah.
I know that the Auditor General has said that we should maybe look at that, and I know that the board are of the view that there definitely needs to be more clarity around that and roles and responsibilities, and we welcome that debate and that discussion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. James?
Can I just return to the issue of live facial recognition technology that the convener was raising? You said, Inspector Sloan, in terms of the Police Scotland's sort of current position was that they didn't have any current plans to use it. However, it has been referenced in this 10-year strategy document. If there were any plans to progress with it in future, how would you take that forward? Would there be a business case, for example?
Yes, thank you. So absolutely, reflecting the 2026 10-year strategy, obviously we said, I think there's the recognition that there be a public expectation that the police modernise and transform and utilise technology, but as I said earlier, in that balanced approach to human rights and privacy. Police Scotland's approach, and clearly we've been on a journey with a number of other technology areas of development, if you like, and there is some learning that we've taken from that. So it's really about having that wider public debate and policy on what the public would expect consent to, and keeping us legitimate, and thereafter, using such things as independent ethics panels, as Mrs Brown mentioned there. We are setting up a framework for data ethics, which is a more nuanced aspect of that, and how our approach would be to actual data, how we use that, a more holistic approach in order to comply with any legislation. But I think the first steps, and I come back to it again, is the right approach, in that we have a legislative framework, that if there is a Scottish Commissioner in place, for them, or whoever that may be, to lead in that public debate, and obviously Police Scotland to be fully involved and informed in that.
So you seem to accept that there are clearly some reservations about the use of this technology, and although you're not using it currently, if it were to be used in the future, you acknowledge that there needs to be a process to go through in terms of consulting with the public, but also once the Biometrics Commissioner's in place, to look at the ethics involved here. So it would be taken forward, with some robust analysis before in any way it was implemented.
Yeah, I absolutely accept that, and that is our absolute intention. And I think it has to go, whatever independent group or ethics panels that we use, there will be nuances depending on what the technology and what area or space we move to. Clearly there'll be, we would expect civil liberties groups, etc., but academia, testing and trialling properly and accurately to understand, actually, first of all, is it viable? Is it within the financial constraints that we have? Is there a proportionality, not only from how we deploy it within the public domain, but also against the backdrop against bang for your buck and making sure that it was a sound financial way forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James. Rona?
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, panel. You're just following on from my colleague's questioning, just when you said bang for your buck. Has any work been carried out to assess the effectiveness and reliability of this technology? I appreciate you haven't started trialling, but are you concerned about, reports that we have heard, for instance, that the level of inaccuracy rates for technology trialled by the Metropolitan Police and South Wales Police were 98% and 91% respectively. So would it concern you to be investing in technology with that high level of rates of inaccuracy?
Thank you. Yeah, again, to reiterate, as we've not embarked upon that, we are aware of the trials that are ongoing, the different, and it's a myriad of commercial companies that provide such technology with different, and I can't comment obviously on what the effectiveness of different pieces of software or commercially they have, but yeah, that would clearly have to form part of a serious consideration around the reliability, particularly again striking that balance of privacy, human rights, intrusion on people, from an equality aspect when you discuss the efficacy of the technology and some of the biases that has been seen to be held in some of these trials.
That's right, because there has been reports of a gender and a racial bias, which is obviously very, very concerning. Maybe Lynn Brown and Tom Nelson would like to contribute.
Thank you very much. In relation, obviously, to rolling out new technology, I think we need to make sure that we do test technology and understand its limitations. Obviously, I am aware of the number of the reports in relation to technology that is already out there. I don't know anything about that technology, but before, and I'm sure before Police Scotland or SPA would want to roll it out, they'd want to assure themselves. Because what it says in the tin, outside the tin, doesn't always mean that it works in the same way whenever you bring it into your own environment. So we'd make sure and want to ensure that that whole system has been tested and validated before we would even take it to the next stage of putting a business case together.
Lynn Brown, do you have any comment?
No, just to support that any major capital investment has to go through an investment appraisal for the benefits on a financial basis, but also there's also those other areas around the rights of the individual that you've been asking about, and we would look at the whole thing. But in terms of the actual technology, they would need to be sure that we were confident that that technology was sound and met all the public interest requirements.
Thank you. And can I just, you mentioned commercial companies, obviously this would presumably be put out to tender, and commercial companies would then try a sales pitch on, saying that they had the best equipment. I mean, are you confident that there's enough technical knowledge within your departments, within the police Scotland, to say, that who evaluate it properly is really what I'm trying to say?
Shall I take it? It would go through public procurement rules, and where we need expertise to bring in to help us make the best decision in terms of best value, we would do that. So where we need support, we would seek it out to meet the requirements of public procurement.
Do you think that might be necessary?
It could be.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, did...
No?
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you for that. I wonder, witnesses will know that we're considering a bill to introduce a Scottish Biometrics Commissioner, and not to preempt any decisions of Parliament. We're very early in the process, but were that legislation to go through, would you see a role for the Biometrics Commission in determining the type of equipment that would be used? That's been suggested to us, because in any field there's a lot of snake oil salespeople out there, and clearly something we'd normally, the figures that were quoted earlier by my colleague Ron here, quite right, of 98%, 91%, you might anticipate that would be success rate rather than failure rate. Put another way, well, you can do the sums yourself there, they're not too good. Would you see a role for a Biometrics Commissioner where someone like that legislation to go through on the nature of equipment? Perhaps Mr Nelson? Yeah.
Sure, thank you very much, Convener. In relation to the role, certainly I would see it as a role where there would be an oversight. And if obviously we do bring in, and we hope we will bring in a code of practice, within the code of practice that we developed as part of the independent advisory group, there was a whole process whereby you go through that validation of rolling out new technology. And certainly we would expect to follow that type of framework again. And I'm sure the Biometrics Commissioner would be interested in obviously making sure that we did follow that and interested in the output from that. But obviously that would then need to go to the SPA board for final sign-off. So certainly I'm sure there would be an interest from the Commissioner whether or not the Commissioner should have a role of saying yes or no. Certainly the Commissioner would have a role in understanding we've gone through a reliable process to get to that point.
And just for the avoidance of doubt, Mr Nelson, I'm not suggesting that they would say whether Police Scotland should have access, but the technical aspects of this, because as my colleague, you know, we would all understand that most people would buy a car and understand what we do. It's understanding the complexity of algorithms which are producing, you know, disproportionate results, not least of a racial and gender basis, which would concern all of us. So is that aspect sufficiently robust?
So you would build that into your assessment protocol to make sure you're covering all those angles in terms of race, gender, lighting, angles, etc., etc. You'd build all that into your assessment process before you actually came to a recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Jenny.
Thank you, Convener. My apologies to the committee and witnesses of a sponsoring event as well this lunchtime, so trying to be in two places at once. The committee has heard in evidence that it is totally impractical to meet consent requirements for the use of live facial recognition technology in public places. And if the technology is then to be introduced, what do you think would need to be done to get that consent and the confidence from the public?
I'm quite happy to take that one. Yep. So again, the consent issue is really an important one, particularly for Police Scotland. So again, learning from some of the trials that are ongoing down south, clearly, depending on the application of facial recognition technology and where it was, but if it was to that wider, there isn't the option for people to opt out, if you like, in some of the uses of it. So for me, again, it comes back to we need to get our ducks in a row. We need to have the conversation. We need to have the wider public debate to get the message out about what is the purpose. We would need to be really clear on why we were using facial recognition technology. It would need to be absolutely for a strictly necessary purpose. It would need to be proportionate. But to directly answer your question, were it to be in that world in the future where it was used, it's about that public engagement through, you know, information, advice, notification, and certainly from the trials there was some observations around, well, was there actually enough that the public knew that they were being, you know, cameras were taking images of their photographs. So it would need to be absolutely foremost in the public's mind. So for me, a huge exercise in public communication, if you like, to get that message across.
Mm-hmm. Any other?
I could maybe add that I think that's where the Biometrics Commissioner will be absolutely invaluable in the Code of Practice. Yeah. And the expectation would be that that would seek to cover most of the concerns and that you would follow that Code of Practice before we get into trialling or going wider than that. So the role of the Biometrics Commissioner is absolutely essential to any sort of introduction of this, and the fact that in Scotland the Biometrics Commissioner has been asked to actually look at this will be part of their remit is reassuring and helpful.
And in terms of that public debate that you spoke about, Duncan Sloan, I guess we know that live facial recognition has been used at you know, political rallies in the past. It's been used at campaign marches, maybe political demonstrations, for example. Do you think that's going to have any sort of impact on people feeling that they're able to express their views in a, you know, democratic way? And is there a tension therefore between that, you know, legitimate right for freedom of expression and perhaps the, you know, their fundamental human rights and the police, obviously, and their responsibility to keep us all safe? A bit of a tension perhaps between those two things.
No, I absolutely agree, but harking back to my previous comments around that tension of intrusiveness and the right to, you know, privacy and their human rights, absolutely. For me, critically for the police, for us in order to maintain that public support, legitimacy, the relationship that we have, there would need to be significant consideration around how we would deploy in that space. And again, that would, for me, be part of, you know, the area for the Biometrics Commissioner to explore that, for some independent, some ethic groups to come round the table and try and identify what the issues are, to find some areas of commonality and consent, if you like.
Any other?
That's fine.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Jenny. Can I ask about, and it's something that you touched on, Mr Sloan, and that is about the general debate about this, because we've referred to the digital triage devices, and there was some debate about that. This is live facial recognition, and it's perhaps more, Mr Nelson will maybe know better than that, the other emerging technologies. Will this debate await the appointment of a biometrics commissioner should that legislation go through the Parliament, and there seems to be cross-party support for that appointment?
So I think the debate is ongoing, probably is the best way to describe, Convener. You know, we welcomed the Cabinet Secretary's approach, an announcement last year of forming an independent reference group where you know, all use, and not just facial recognition technology, but police use of technology. So that's a piece of work that we welcome, support, and we would want to be engaged in to further that debate, if you like, because I think the debate is ongoing.
Ms Brown,
Yes, following up on that, the terms of reference have just come out on that group. The SPA will be represented on Police Scotland and other relevant parties, and I think that will reassure the public and reassure the committee how this has been taken forward in the future.
Thank you very much. Any emerging technologies you wish to share with us, Mr Nelson, that we need to know about?
I've none up my sleeve at the moment.
But do you think a generic approach as regards testing issues of human rights, the community impact, can we get something that would apply to all technologies, or will we be going through this exercise on each occasion, do you think?
To me, you'll be taking all the technology through the same assessment. You know, but it's important to get that framework and understanding of how it's going to work. But obviously there'll be different things you need to look at depending on the technology and how intrusive or otherwise that may be.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, just apologies if I missed this when my colleague Liam MacArthur was asking his questions. It was just to find out, are any other types of images such as CCTV or body-worn videos or cameras or anything uploaded onto the database at present?
No, there will be images clearly if the police are investigating a crime or an investigation where a CCTV image was there, that would be used to try and compare against for a specific purpose. It's not live, it would be retrospective.
Yeah, it's not actually on the database then?
No, no.
Right, okay, thank you.
Do members have any further questions at all? Okay, can I thank the witnesses for their very succinct answers? We're maybe a wee bit sharper than usual, but it's not that we haven't got through a considerable amount of information, so thank you very much indeed for that, and I'll suspend briefly before we move into private session. Thank you.